All right. So this is part two of my kind of graphic organizer explainer video. Um, so the first one I did, if you didn't catch it, it was the soapstone video, me kind of unpacking what soapstone was, how to use it. And so this one is FIDDS. Okay. And if you watched the soapstone video before, you know that the soapstone video, like I said, was more about nonfiction, right? So we're talking like speeches, pamphlets, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. Like these are all nonfiction things, right? FIDS is more universal in all the different ways I can use it. I can use FIDS for poetry. If I wanted to take an Anne Bradstreet poem and I wanted to analyze it, break it down using FIDS, I could totally do that. I could do it with short stories. I could do it with novels. I could do it with a bunch of different things. And so FIDS is a little bit more kind of applicable to a lot of different things. And so I'm going to show you examples of these, what each letter of the acronym FIDS, FIDDS, stands for, how to apply it. And then hopefully that helps you kind of conceptualize. If I give you a FIDS graphic organizer, here's how I'm going to use it. Here's how I could apply it. Okay. And so the first one is figurative language. Okay. So figurative language is, all encompassing, right? It's metaphors, it's similes, onomatopoeia, it is alliteration, it's allusions, it's hyperbole, it's all sorts of things. So figurative language is really all encompassing. Okay, there's a lot of different things you can do for figurative language. And so, like the example I give here from The Great Gatsby, all these examples are from The Great Gatsby. So this is a valley of ashes, a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat. Okay, there's a lot happening here. Okay, so first off, we got a metaphor, valley of ashes. Okay, literally not a valley of ashes. It's not just a valley of ashes, right? But it is a metaphor to describe a part of the city that is full of industry. It is full of kind of the residue of industry, right? Like here's where all the junk goes to after we make stuff, right? It's a very industrial part of town, right? But the Valley of Ashes kind of conveys that this isn't a place we want to be, right? It seems very dirty, very grimy, very just kind of, you know, gross. And that word ashes is very kind of important because ashes makes us think like, okay, this is the stuff that's left over after things have been burned and destroyed. And then you've got a fantastic farm, right? Which is a kind of alliteration, right? A fantastic farm. It's a farm, but it's fantastic. This is not the farm that you understand, that you would know. It's not growing corn or crops or things like that. And then it moves us into the last part, which is where ashes grow like wheat, where the ashes are growing and they're constantly just building and building and building, right? And if you ever seen like a cornfield in like Iowa or Nebraska, you see how tall that corn grows. Imagine that, but with piles of ashes, right? Just lumps of dirt and ash and junk, right? And just piling up like that. That's a very effective simile. That's a very powerful simile. Okay. Um, and so what that does, what all those little tiny figurative language things can convey to the reader is that this is not a nice place to live. This is a place where if you live here, you are really down on your luck, right? And you're probably very poor because if you were poor or if you were not poor, you wouldn't be living here, right? You would if you had the option of moving out of the valley of ashes, you probably would you not? And so that's kind of what's happening here in the figurative language section, right? And so that's one way of kind of analyzing figurative language, right? How the author uses that. Next up, we've got imagery. Okay. So imagery is sensory details. Okay. People get imagery and figurative language confused, and oftentimes they complement each other, right? So like, one kind of helps the other, but imagery is like your sensory details, your five senses. Okay. Sight, smell, taste, touch, sound. Okay. Describing things with those senses, okay, helps the reader paint a mental picture. Okay. So if you look at the example from The Great Gatsby, is a white ash and dust veiled his dark suit and his pale hair. as it veiled everything in the vicinity except his wife, who moved close to Tom. The thing we get out of this is color: white, ash, white, pale hair, dark suit. So we get this sort of weird imagery of everything is pale, everything is kind of got this sick, ashen color to it. And then you've got this guy with a dark suit that kind of stands out among the paleness, right? It's almost kind of a weird contrast between these two colors. That's a mental picture, right? And it's really cool. And the imagery can also be very metaphorical, right? Over here on the right hand side, what you have is you have the kind of metaphor, right, or the symbolism of a suit, a very nice, very crisp, very clean, dark suit against this white sickness and ash, and how the two kind of contrast each other, right? And how he represents sort of this wealth coming into this place of poverty and sickness, right? And so that's kind of a cool another layer to the imagery here. So next up, we have diction. And diction is just the choice of words I use, right? Why do I use this word over another word? Why do I use that word over this word, which is probably easier and a lot makes more sense? Well, everything's intentional, right, that an author does. And so when an author uses a specific word over another, right, like odor versus aroma, odor, bad smell, aroma, good smell, those are the connotations that come with those words. It's a similar thing to like when authors use specific words over another, right? That might make more sense or might be kind of the first word that pops in your head, right? Well, sometimes it's not the best thing to use the first word that pops in your head because maybe there's another way to put it that evokes something deeper, right? Or evokes something more powerful. And so if you look at the example, she was in her middle 30s and faintly stout, but she carried her surplus flesh as sensuously as some women can. That's an interesting way of describing fat, right? Because he's talking about a fat woman and he's talking about her body fat, right? So like her belly, her fat rolls or something like that. But he doesn't say fat rolls or belly or anything like that. He says surplus flesh. Well, why use that? Well, surplus flesh is a very almost kind of cold and almost kind of scientific way, right, of describing something, right? It sounds very much like you would read something on like a catalog, right? Like surplus flesh. Oh, that sounds nice. But it's just describing someone who's a little fatter, right, than normal. And rather than calling her fat, he's using it in this very kind of cold scientific language that helps us kind of think that, okay, maybe he doesn't want us to necessarily associate her too much with fat, right? Um, and so diction is important, right? Um, diction matters. Why you use a certain word matters, okay? All right, details is the one that trips people up the most. Details is just any specific information, okay? So don't let it get too confused. Details is just what's the specific info that I put in this, right? That either helps orient the reader, that helps them understand what specifically is happening. And so the example here, I went to New York with Tom on the train one afternoon, and when we stopped by the ash heaps, he jumped to his feet and taking hold of my elbow, literally forced me from the car. Okay. And so in this exchange, literally forced me from the car. Okay. Literally means like not figuratively. So he is actively, actually, not exaggerating, pushing him out of the car. Okay. And that little detail there, the fact that he is pushing him out of the car, okay, tells me something in a nonverbal way, right? It tells me that he is kind of a brute. He's kind of a he's kind of a physical brute, right? He's used to using his strength to get his way, and he's also maybe not that intellectual because he's not actually talking, telling him, "Hey, let's get out of the car." He's a brute. He pushes him. He pushes people around. He pushes people, and that's how he gets his way all the time. Notice he doesn't say that out loud. He doesn't come out and tell me Tom is used to getting his way by using his strength. He doesn't say that. He just says, Tom forced me out of the car. And that little detail right there is an example of show, don't tell, right? The author is showing me Tom is used to getting his way by using his strength. He's not telling me that, right? And so little details like that are really significant in helping me kind of pick up on little breadcrumbs. That's why I call them, little breadcrumbs the author is leaving behind, okay? Syntax. Okay, so the syntax of something is the sentence construction, the sentence structure, okay? Take you back to middle school where we talked a lot about simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences. So these all matter. If you have a book of nothing but simple sentences, right? It's going to get boring after a while. See spot run. Spot runs fast. Spot chases car. Spot catches car. Spot doesn't know what to do. Right? Like these all simple sentences, and it would just get boring for an entire book, 100 pages, 200 pages of that, right? And it would get really confusing if you had a book of nothing but compound, complex sentences, right? So syntax can matter as well. The way the author constructs a sentence or puts two sentences together or puts two ideas together is really significant. So an example here would be like the interior was unprosperous and bare. The only car visible was a dust-covered wreck of a Ford, which crouched in the dim corner. So what he does here is he uses a semicolon, right? And if you remember my punctuation stuff, semicolons are used when you have two independent clauses joined together and they are linked by ideas, okay? Here we have the interior was unprosperous and bare. The only car visible was a dust-covered wreck of a Ford, which crouched in a dim corner, okay? So here we have two things, right? We've got this first idea, which is more general, right? We're talking about the inside of a garage. The interior of the garage was unprosperous and bare, right? It's not a lot in it. And then we go from that to way more specific. He's going to give us a little bit more of a framework or a clear, specific detail about what is going on in that garage. The only car visible was a dust-covered wreck of a Ford, okay? So the syntax matters. These two ideas are linked together, and that second clause builds off the first one. The first one's more general, the second one's more specific, right? And so that semicolon is doing a lot there in that sentence. And so the way that you construct a sentence can be very effective, right? Whether that's by using a semicolon or a comma and a conjunction or even a colon, which is my personal favorite punctuation mark. So there's a lot of different things you can do with this stuff. And so syntax, the way that you construct a sentence, the way that you build a sentence matters. Okay. And so figurative language, imagery, diction, details, syntax. That's what FIDDS is. That's how to use it. If you have any questions about that, let me know. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.